says to these people, he says, I want the barren to be fruitful. But in order for the barren to be fruitful, there has to be an enlargement of the place of our tent. You may be tonight living in a restricted place. More often than not, the restricted places of my life are self-imposed that I refuse to admit to. More often than not, the limitations that are upon my life and our mindset is closed. The second time I ever got a chance to preach, I preached the best sermon that I could ever preach. And the good deacon, there's always a good deacon, stood at the back and said to me, he said, "You did okay." And I made a determination on that particular day because I had failed the first time I had ever preached, not too far down this road. And the second time I went to preach, I began to make some declarations over my life. I must not know what I'm doing. I must not be able to do what God has placed inside my heart. And my mind began to be closed up to my future, and I became transplanted and uprooted from one place and placed into another. And because of the concepts that I had allowed in my life as being too narrow, and my philosophy being backward, and my logic was lopsided, at that point in time, my mind was not operating in a functional manner for me to believe that when abundance was about to come, that abundance could be mine to experience. And some of you tonight have lived in that place for so long. You've been limited by your thought patterns. You've been limited by your structures and your systems of life. And because of that, God is here by the word of Isaiah saying, enlarge the place. He said, would you enlarge the place? Would you enlarge the capacity of what you'll believe me for? Everybody, when we say enlarge the place of our tent, it means that we're going to believe God, that God's going to make more space for us, that God's going to make more room for us, that God's going to expand the horizons. And in the midst of that, here's my prayer for each and every one of us tonight, that there would be an elasticity in our hearts and in our life, that we wouldn't be such a people that would tear when we are pulled, that we wouldn't be such a people that would become broken, so to speak, when the situations are trying to expand. The life that I experienced in my 6-year-old would never have been realized if my wife had not been willing to go through the expanding process to bring forth this little life. And when I recognize about my life and I recognize about your life, that when I ask God to enlarge the place of my tent, first of all, it brings me to this place, very practical. It's this place of my belief system. What are you believing for tonight? What are you believing for tonight? I've met people after people who have said to me, why do you stay in that fellowship? I said, I still go home for Christmas dinner. Why would I go anywhere else for Christmas dinner? Because that's my family. Somebody asked me, why do you stay in the Fellowship of Christian Assemblies? For this very reason, because we have a long history, but not because of history, but because we're family. Some people would describe it, these are my people, this is my clan, that's why I'm still here after 30-some-odd years. And at that point in time, when I recognize and I evaluate what are my core beliefs, some people are not with us tonight because their core beliefs have given them a description about what we are, that we have been instead of what's going to be, that we have we had our glory day. You just try and pastor a church with 63 years worth of history. Oh, Father. I see some people. I think the only person in that bunch is Pastor Jim, who has a good positive report about what God did and what God is doing. But I meet people on a regular basis. I see them coming. I can see it in their eyes. And they say, oh, you're little John. I said, I'm 240 pounds. What's little about me? Come on. And they want to hold you back into a season of time of where you were. I know when some people are mad at me. You know, when they like me, they'll call me Pastor. When they don't like me, they'll call me John. And if they really don't like me, they'll call me Little John. And they try to take me back to a time and a season of what has been. God has allowed our place in 63 years to see multitudes of people saved. The waters of baptism have been troubled on a regular basis. We're believing God that they will continue to be troubled into the near future. My theology does not depict, and I've asked God not to come back very soon because I've got a lot of things to do. But if He does, that's okay. But in the meantime, I'm going to work diligently as His steward in His kingdom of what He's given. But I recognize oftentimes people will hold us back in where we were. They'll say, you remember back in the 70s. You know what? When in the 1970s, when thousands of people were getting saved in my church, I couldn't have given a hoot because I was 4 years old. So now I've got to create a brand new future into my future because I want to tell a story in 2012. I want to tell a brand new story in 2013 and 2014. I want to create a story for my kids that is not a story about what has gone by. I'm thankful that my grandfather was born in 1882. I'm thankful that he got on the back of a cattle car from Stratford, Ontario and arrived in Calgary in 1901. I'm thankful that he gave his heart to Jesus Christ. That I'm thankful that at 50 he went to Bible school. I'm thankful that he did all that he did. I'm thankful for the heritage He's given, but I can't live back there. But I've got to live in the now. But oftentimes, people around us, oftentimes the people that you surround yourself with. I just got rid of my last friend from that era. I disposed of him because he continually wanted to remind me of my history. And our mindset and our beliefs come across in our assumptions because what we believe about life will determine the conclusions that we shall see fulfilled in our life. What you believe about your life will be fulfilled. Therefore, I can hear the word of the Lord say, enlarge the place of your tent. Because some of you are thinking small-minded. Some of you tonight, my mama said to me the other night, are you ready? I said, I'm not sure. She said, well, you better get ready. I said, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? They even never invite me to preach again. So I'm like my daddy said, he might have got his last introduction and I might get my last time in front of you. So I'm going to tell you straight like it is tonight. Some of you have thinking that is not allowing you to build the tent that God wants to be built because the premise of your life is much too small. Therefore, God is in the business tonight, and He's up to it tonight, and He has more than enough resources tonight to enlarge your capacity, to enlarge your place. For many people, we talk about abundance, but then we live in scarcity. Because poverty, we don't believe that we can live in abundance. Many people around us, oftentimes they tell me, I listen to Bishop Tudor Bismarck from Zimbabwe. My dear brother from Zimbabwe, he's here, that pastors out in Siloam. I asked him in Shalom, in Steinbeck, I said, are you the only Zimbabwean in Steinbeck? He said, no, there's a couple of us. But Tudor Bismarck pastors a large church in Zimbabwe. And he said an interesting thing. He says, it's amazing to think that on the soil of Africa, we have all of the resources, we have all the gold, all the diamonds, all the oil, all the platinum, all the plutonium, and yet there are people sitting and living on top of diamond fields who have absolutely nothing to eat. Why? He declares, as an African, I'm not saying this from my perspective, he's declaring from his perspective. He's saying it's not a resource problem, it is a concept problem. It is the assumptions that people have allowed themselves to live with. It is the premise that they have allowed themselves to take unto their life. See, our assumptions steal our faith and our joy. But God comes on the scene tonight and He says, I want to change your assumptions. He says, I want you to change your belief systems. And when I evaluate my core belief systems and my assumptions, and I find areas where those areas are holding me back, many people, if truth be told, I was 38 years old before I got married. And if I heard it once, I heard it twice. Is there something wrong with you as a single person? And if they were really brave and bigger than I, they would say something like this. They would question my sexuality. Honest to God. Because I had chosen to wait for 38 years to take unto myself a beautiful bride. People's assumptions about us will hold us back. And oftentimes it's when we believe their assumptions that we get held back. But God is actually asking us tonight, He's saying there has to be a redemarcation of the boundaries that we operate in. Most of us in this room have excluded ourselves out of something that we need to be including ourselves in. I talked to a pastor not too long ago. He's retired. And I said to him, Pastor, what are you doing now? He said, as you can see, I'm out walking my dog. I said, why? He said, because there's not much else for me to do. I'm at the end of my day. I said, you still have 2 good legs? He said, yeah. I said, your heart's still working well? He said, yeah. I said, you still get a good pension? He said, yeah. I said, your life is not over. But the assumption of his life is because he had served for a season of time that his life was over. I'm thankful that my granddaddy, at around the 50-year age mark of his life, decided to leave the business world and to enter into ministry, and became one of the oldest students in his Bible college in Toronto. And at that point in time, when other people looked at him and wondered why in the world he was there, because he was too old. There was one thing that I liked about my grandfather that very much, aside from the fact that we used to watch wrestling together. Can't watch it at home, so you go to grandfather's. So I'm with my sister who likes to watch wrestling over here. They wouldn't give my grandfather a church because he's too old. So the premise of his life said this: if they won't give me a church, I'm going to go buy a church.